All right, welcome to Today's Verdict, the show where legal issues meet real-life stories. We bring you expert analysis, compelling cases, and the verdicts that shape our community. Coming up, we dive into the issue of wrongful incarceration through the case of Eduardo Caba, uncovering systematic failures and exploring how individuals can navigate and challenge injustice within the criminal justice system. Then the arrest of New York City Comptroller Brad Lander by federal agents at an immigration court has raised serious legal and constitutional questions. We'll speak with a legal expert about the implications for federal authority, local governance, and protest rights. As you can see, we have much to get to. So stay tuned. Today's Verdict starts right now. All right, hello and welcome to Today's Verdict, the interactive show that gives you your legal rights and options. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesh. Today's Verdict is always encouraging you to stay connected. Make sure to tweet me at David Lesh and hashtag Ask Today's Verdict if you have a question. And check us out at BronxNet.tv. In today's discussion, we will address the serious and far-reaching issue of wrongful incarceration, examining the systematic failures that contribute to these injustices. Central to our conversation is the case of Eduardo Caba, whose experience illustrates the profound human impact of such failures. While we will briefly explore his personal story, our primary focus will be on offering informed guidance, effective support strategies, and policy insights for those affected by similar circumstances. Here to speak towards this issue is Eli Northrup, the policy director in the criminal defense practice for the Bronx Defenders. Eli, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me, David.
Fellow attorney. There's one thing that I remember really from law school is, in terms of that criminal field is double jeopardy and wrongful conviction. Both depends on what side of the fence you're on.
Right.
When it comes to wrongful conviction, and I've seen it many times, unfortunately, in the Bronx, you would think that the pendulum would be switching in such a way that we would be giving more insight or more rights to those who've been wrongfully convicted, but that didn't happen here.
No, I mean, I think what you're seeing with this case and in general is the court system really tries to protect its integrity. So if a conviction has occurred, it's actually very difficult for it to get overturned. And there's only a few avenues that you can use. And even in a case like Mr. Caba's, where the defense and the prosecution agrees, the judge may not agree. And so the real way to solve wrongful convictions is to prevent them from happening in the first place, because once you get to the point where somebody's been convicted, it's hard to reverse.
Well, let's talk about this particular case. Why did it happen?
Okay, so, and I just want to be very clear, I don't represent Mr. Caba. Our office didn't represent him, but I know a bit about the case, and his case is an example of stuff that we see in the Bronx all the time, unfortunately. Mr. Caba was charged with burglary. In 1995, there was an allegation that a number of men broke into this apartment on East Meshola Parkway and stole jewelry out of a safe. And there was a woman, a 44-year-old woman, who was in the apartment. And one of the men supposedly was wearing a light-colored jacket. Mr. Caba was arrested and put in a lineup. And in that lineup were a number of people. He was the only one with a light-colored jacket. Everybody else had a dark-colored jacket. In addition, he was actually wearing a trench coat.
A trench coat. It has some kind of towel or something. I don't
right.
know
Well, they put what the police did is they put a blanket over everybody's laps, so it looked like he was wearing a short jacket, a light-colored jacket. So it was what we call a suggestive identification. And the person said, I think it's this guy. And that was really the only evidence connecting him to this crime.
A color of a jacket.
Yeah, he was the only one in the lineup who fit the description. So that's not an appropriate lineup. And anyway, he was convicted and served over 12 years in prison.
Now, at some point, they realized, or somebody realized, he didn't really do this.
Right.
Was it the DA's office? Was it his own private attorney who made the case?
Yeah, so after he was convicted and after he got out, actually, he had owned a supermarket before he was arrested, and he was going through struggles, which many people do, but he had a post-conviction attorney who actually brought it to the Bronx DA's office. And when the DA's office looked at the case, they agreed. And they said, no, this wasn't an appropriate conviction. They went to the judge. They asked for it, both sides asked for it to be overturned. But the judge didn't feel like at the time that he had enough information to actually overturn the conviction. So his case is ongoing. And hopefully, once more information is given to the judge, he will go along with it, and Mr. Caba will see some measure of justice, but that remains to be seen.
Well, someone else might say, oh, what's the big deal? He did his time, and now he can do whatever he wants. Who cares? But you know what? It follows you, these convictions. And there's also a potential for civil suits that you may be able to bring against the justice system.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think, what's the big deal? 12 years of your life for something you didn't do. That's a pretty big deal. And the mental strain and the trauma that you go through knowing that you weren't even in there in the first place for any good reason, I think it's immense. And talk to anybody who's been through that, and I think you would feel that. But also clearing your name. I mean, he's not trying to get out of jail. He's out of jail. He's trying to clear his name so he can move forward. It's his reputation. It's what he has, and he cares deeply about it, as I would if I were in his position. And so getting this off of his record allows him to actually move forward in a way that's meaningful.
Let me ask you a question. Other areas that you think the prosecutor could turn over exculpatory evidence, where would we find that?
Right. I mean, so actually, this is something that's been in the news a lot lately, discovery reform in criminal cases. For many, many years in New York State, prosecutors were not required to turn over evidence to the defense until the eve of trial. Actually, that was the truth until 2019. We changed the laws in 2019. In 2020, they went into effect. But you may have heard on the news over the last few months, the governor actually and a number of DAs have been working to try to roll those protections back, and so that you don't actually get all the evidence in a case, which I think is really wrong-headed.
You would think that you would want to give all the evidence when you're dealing with somebody's freedom.
Absolutely.
Just
I think
from a point of view of just
transparency.
Just doing the right thing.
Yeah, and Texas, guess what? They give all the evidence over there. And so
in Texas they do.
In Texas they do. So I think New York, some modifications were recently made to the law, but I think the vast majority, if you look nationwide at convictions and wrongful convictions where people were later exonerated by DNA, so we know that they didn't do it, in the vast majority of cases, it involved some piece of evidence that wasn't turned over. So why don't we just turn over all the evidence, and the playing field can be more even?
Listen, I discussed this with you off camera. On the civil side, the plaintiff trial attorneys have to give over a lot of stuff which we never had to give. Everything from, you ever been in an accident before to you ever sued this particular defendant before?
Right.
They're very liberal, and I can't object. A few things I still do, but I can't. That's how we're becoming a more liberal society.
Right.
Let's give that stuff over.
Right, and if you can do it when money's on the line,
that's right.
Why shouldn't we be doing it when somebody's freedom's on the line? And you got to remember, too, in criminal cases, it's the prosecution and law enforcement who has all the evidence. They're the ones that have it all. It's not in the possession of the accused until they hand it over.
Now, I know you're training your staff in terms of discovery. How do you intend to do that?
Well, just, we have great lawyers at the Bronx Defenders. They knew exactly what the law said before these amendments. So we need to go through these new amendments that were just part of the budget and make sure everybody understands what the obligations are going forward. And so it's just an update, essentially, on what that is.
Let me ask you a question. There are a lot of people who are behind bars now who would love the chance to be able to state their case. How do they do it?
I wish I had a good answer for you, because while you're entitled to an attorney on your direct appeal, after that's been exhausted, even if new evidence comes to light later on, you're not necessarily entitled to an attorney to challenge your conviction. Mr. Caba was assisted by somebody from a clinic in a law school. There are organizations like
that's the way to go.
Yeah, the Innocence Project and otherwise that you can write to. But I think the real emphasis and one of the lessons I think we should be taking is, how do we prevent these wrongful convictions from happening in the first place? What can we do in terms of policy measures, in terms of if you are being accused right now, what can you do to get to the point where you never are convicted of something?
I'm a big fan of DNA.
Yeah.
It is what it is. But ID is different.
Yeah.
People's perception of what they see when they see it. There have been so many psychological studies suggesting that you may think it's white when it was really black.
Right. 70% of wrongful convictions where there were later DNA exonerations were based on eyewitness identifications. And it's tough because if you're a juror, somebody comes in and says, oh, that's him, he did this. You're inclined to believe them.
That's
oh,
right.
Why would somebody say that? But it turns out the more and more research that's been done, eyewitness identification is one of the weakest forms of evidence,
right.
and it's very, very faulty.
And it's always been.
Yes.
DNA is different.
Yeah.
You know, it's a fingerprint. I get that. But, well.
Yeah. And there are measures you can put in place to protect from eyewitness identifications, many of which New York has not done. Yeah, so okay, like for example, in Mr. Caba's case, it really came down to this lineup, right? We call this an identification procedure, a show up, a lineup where a witness comes and looks at a person and says, oh, that was them. And there's basically 4 pillars to make something a more accurate identification, which you can put in a statute, you can put in law, and certain states have done this to make it more fair. So one is that it's blinded, meaning that the person, the law enforcement officer administering the procedure doesn't know who the suspect is. So they can't put any pressure on the person who's identifying, right? I don't even know. I'm the cop, but I don't even know who we think the suspect is. That's number one. The second is that the whole thing is recorded so that a judge can later look at it. The third is that there are instructions given to the witness, specific instructions on how they should be looking to identify the person. And the fourth is what's called a confidence statement. Not just that you say, it's him, but how sure are you that it's that person? Because it's very different if you're...
Everybody likes to make it seem that they're so sure of their opinion on everything in the world.
Right.
So how much is that going to matter, though?
Well, but people do. I mean, now when you go to a lineup, which I do if I have a client who knows that they're going to be put into one, you see how witnesses respond, and it's not really recorded later on when they say, "Oh, identified that person." But if you're in the room and you see it, then you know.
Then you know.
Yeah, and I think that honestly, David, is one of the biggest things we could do to prevent things like that. Is have more of a focus on what's called early defense, giving individuals counsel before that they are arrested. So if somebody's a suspect, if somebody's being called in to speak with police, you know, they can call the Bronx Defenders. We actually have an early defense hotline, and they can call, and we represent people at the lineup procedures sometimes, and that would have been effective in Mr. Caba's case.
Listen, tell me a little bit about your organization, just so that we know how to contact you if there's an issue. Where do we find you?
Of course, yeah. So the Bronx Defenders is what's called a holistic public defense organization. We've been operating for over 25 years. We're located on East 161st Street and Cortlandt Avenue, right down from the courthouse. I've given them the hotline to contact us, which you can see on your screen if you are willing to put it on there.
You see it.
And no, what we do is we represent individuals charged with crimes who can't afford to pay for an attorney. So we give free legal help and advice. We represent people from the time they're investigated all the way through the trial ends. And we also have, the reason I say it's a holistic organization, we also represent people in family court, who are facing their children being taken away. In immigration court, if they're facing loss of, their status. And we also represent people in civil court.
And we're going to have you come back and discuss all of that.
Yeah, somebody will come back and talk about it. But the point is, we do all this because we understand somebody gets sucked into the criminal system. They may actually have other problems as well that they need help with, and we can be a point to help with all those different issues.
Terrific.
Yeah.
I'd love to have you back.
I'd love to be back.
All right, don't go anywhere because we'll be right back with more Today's Verdict. All right, welcome back. We're diving into a troubling and unprecedented incident, the arrest of New York City Comptroller Brad Lander by federal agents during a peaceful protest. What does this mean for civil liberties, sanctuary city policies, and the growing tension between local officials and federal enforcement? We're joined by Jason Taper, a legal fellow with the Surveillance Technology Oversight Project, to help us unpack the legal, constitutional, and democratic states. How you doing, Jason?
Good to be with you.
All right, this topic seems to be in the news all the time. They're out to get anybody has any potential to be illegal. What's going on right now? I mean, is it getting a little better? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, ICE is expanding its profile all throughout the country. In theory, of course, they are supposed to only be enforcing immigration law, but it seems that they keep moving the goalposts. They are not legally required to show their faces. They're not, they're pulling up on people in public. It's just a creep. It is a growth of this surveillance police state that seems to not have any backing to it. It seems lawless. It seems unconstrained.
And it doesn't seem like it's slowing down, is what you're telling me.
Oh, only ramping up from what I can tell.
Let's say somebody's watching now, and they're not legal, right? They're afraid to go to the courthouse. They're afraid to go to the post office. What do they do? Can you advise them? Is that possible?
It's hard because ICE has been given such a blank check by the Immigration and Nationality Act and by the post 9/11 reorganization of the Department of Homeland Security. ICE is allowed to operate in public. Now, ICE does need a judicial warrant to arrest folks in their own homes, and that's why we've seen so much of this courthouse arrest, because they're allowed to do in public what they would otherwise need a judicial warrant to do in private. Obviously, that is the problem here. People should not be living their lives in fear to go out in public, staying in the shadows. But as the law is currently written, that is what ICE is doing.
And then you have, these politicians like Brad Lander who right on the front lines, they go right in there. I can't remember the last time I saw politicians who were arrested for standing up for their community. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's chilling. It's a sign of creeping authoritarianism, right? I mean, first and foremost, Brad Lander didn't do anything illegal. He was never charged with anything, which means, right, this was an arrest of a political opponent of the presidential administration without any criminal basis to it. This is the kind of thing you see in authoritarian states.
Did they have the authority to do this, ICE? I mean, did they have the authority to arrest him? This is the first question I want to know the answer to.
If he had broken the law, yes. ICE are still federal law enforcement. If they see someone break the law, any law other than state and local ones, they can still arrest. But the thing is that Brad Lander, everyone saw the video. Brad Lander did not do anything wrong. Some spokesperson at Department of Homeland Security said that he assaulted an officer, but everyone has seen the video. He did nothing like that. Because he did nothing, they had no legal authority to arrest him.
A lot of people think it's an abuse of power on the basis of ICE. I saw the video as well. I did not see him in any way threatening anybody. Maybe if they asked him to leave, he should have left. I'm not quite sure, but he certainly wasn't threatening anybody. And it just seems like an abuse of power. So New York City is the sanctuary city, right? There are a few of them in the United States. Do you think we still have the strength to be a sanctuary city?
The strength. That's an interesting phrasing because, right, the sanctuary city policies are a ban on city and state, call it cooperation with ICE. But we have seen from this presidential administration targeting cities like New York and Los Angeles that they are going to send ICE in as targeting, as maybe political retaliation, as attacking sanctuary cities. Now we can still, as New York, stand strong and not be complicit in this. We can refuse to make the problem worse with our own city and state tax dollars. And so I think in that sense, we can, keep up that strength. But ICE is being sent in, and we have to keep an eye on that, even despite the still legally effective sanctuary policies in New York.
Well, how can we specifically not make things worse? So what thoughts on that?
Well, the sanctuary law requires New York City and state police not to cooperate with ICE. That's what I mean by that. We do not have to use our city and state taxpayer dollars to do what the Trump administration is sending ICE in to do, whether we want them to or not.
Let's talk about something that I generally like to talk about on this program, and that's really the word on the street. What do you hear in terms of these? It's just chilling where they're picking you up or how they're picking you up, or you're afraid to go to the grocery store. What is the word on the street?
Yeah, I think the scariest thing, for me at least, is the secretiveness of it. There's been a lot of talk about whether ICE constitutes a secret police, right? They cover their faces, they don't have to identify themselves, and there has been this army of, occasional reports of imposters, right? Folks dressing up as ICE agents, either reports of white supremacists doing so, people committing sexual assault while dressed as impersonating ICE agents. So you really get this this environment of chaos, of fear, right? Of we don't know. And I think that has to be the point. Why else would it be so secretive? But yeah, the word on the street is chaos, is when you have this roving, unaccountable secret police force, of course everyone's going to be, looking over their shoulders.
We did some immigration work in our firm for years, and it was always difficult because the law was changing. It's one of those areas of the law that you really had to read up on to make sure you understood what was going on. It doesn't seem like there's any clear path now for practicing attorneys to even figure out how to represent somebody or what to do. What are your thoughts on that?
How to represent someone who's in immigration detention?
Yes.
ICE is still United States police force. They still have to follow the Constitution. There are criminal procedure protections, right? Fourth Amendment protections, Fifth Amendment protections. But of course, in order to deport someone, that is the decision of an immigration judge. At the end of the day, that is not the decision of ICE itself. You can still fight that, right? Folks, when they are swept up, right, when we've seen U.S. citizens whose real IDs have been dismissed as fake, the reason they are not getting deported, of course, is that we have that backstop of the judiciary. You can still make your individual case. Everyone still has a right to their individual day in court. That is the ultimate backstop, is the judges.
Let's talk a little bit about your organization, commonly known as STOP. What are you guys doing? How are you handling this new normal?
Yeah, STOP, Surveillance Technology Oversight Project, focuses on a lot of different areas on kind of the creeping overreach of surveillance and authoritarianism in all of its forms. The New York For All Act is something that we support in particular. We do a lot of advocacy work as well as our litigation, which would expand immigration protections at the city level. Individually, we are also fighting against some of the technology that ICE uses. There's a lot of information sharing of technologies like facial recognition that amplify the ability for ICE to search through these communities and cause even more fear. We're fighting back technology by technology. It is a very broad fight, so we're taking a lot of different tacks, but through the courts and through the legislatures.
The technology that you're talking about, the surveillance, many times, their facial recognition is not correct. They're targeting the wrong people, or they may look like somebody. There's a twin, or there's a doppelganger that looks like you. Are they relying very much on the facial recognition software?
I can't really speak to, internal percentages and policies for ICE. But we do know that it is an extremely dangerous tool in their hands, right? As you said, it's incredibly inaccurate, and it's disproportionately inaccurate for people of color. It gets black and brown faces wrong at a much higher rate. And even when it's completely accurate, right, that just amplifies the ability of ICE to make these arrests, to search through without regard for truth. I don't know how much they're using it, but I know that in their hands it's a dangerous tool.
The federal government, and we know where Trump stands on this, but locally, from a New York City perspective, are we moving to the right when it comes to immigration policies? What are your thoughts?
I mean, that's hard to say because, we have such vibrant and powerful communities of immigrants. New York City is a city of immigrants, is a city built by immigration. America, of course, is a country built by immigration. It's so easy to get caught up in all of this backlash framing and kind of political horse race, what polls better or worse. But I think people really believe in and love their neighbors, which all around us is immigrants. It's so hard to politicize what is just people living in community in the city.
Well, we'll leave it there. Jason, thanks so much. Hopefully you can come back and give us a little bit of an update.
Happy to do so. Thanks for having me on.
It's my pleasure. All right, that's all the time we have for today. I'd like to thank our guests for joining us, and of course, you, the viewers, for watching. If you missed any part of today's show, be sure to check it out on YouTube. Also, remember, if there is a legal issue or topic you'd like to see on a future edition of Today's Verdict, feel free to contact me at davidlesh@bronxnet.org or tweet me at davidlesh. Make sure to hashtag Today's Verdict. From myself and all of us at Today's Verdict, always remember, know your rights, know your issues, reach a verdict. I'm David Lesh, and we'll see you again soon with an all-new episode of Today's Verdict right here on BronxNet. And looking forward to working with my new producer, Rebecca. All right, see you soon.